What's up, guys? Welcome to Seahawks Forever. A little bit different look and feel and even sound probably than the normal show. It's because I am where am I? I'm in Mesa, Arizona. Went to the game yesterday. I'll share my thoughts on what I thought. Seeing it in person, just got done with the rewatch. This is getting fun, you guys. As the thumbnail expresses on YouTube, this is a team worth getting excited about. And I want you to all start getting excited about a team. This is a team that's getting better and better by the week. It is becoming a team that looks more and more legitimate by the week. And we just saw the most complete performance in all three phases of the game against a team that up until a couple of weeks ago was kind of the darling in the league and everybody thought was on the up and a team to really watch out for and be scared of. And we're a favorite in this game, and a lot of the national pundits picked them to win, but the Seahawks come out on top of this one, grab a stronger hold of the NFC division lead with a couple of massive NFC showdowns coming up the next couple of weeks. I'll give you my thoughts, what I think this game means in the big picture, and some of the things I saw on the field coming up next. This is Seahawks.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
This show will be a little bit lower tech than normal, just working off the laptop here in Arizona, but get your comments and your questions, your takes ready, because I definitely want to get into those. The first thing I wanted to do is kind of go back and recap my three keys that I had going into the game and judge how the team did in those areas. So my three keys were clean it up, switch it up, and travel well. Clean it up means just what we're talking about, not necessarily just penalties. I think the Seahawks had 9 penalties in this game, but they weren't backbreakers. They weren't massive, costly penalties as they've been so much in the past. I can think of off the top of my head, without looking at the total drive chart, just one drive that was kind of short-circuited by penalty and some negative yardage there. But I meant clean in their operation, assignment sound, being in the right place at the right time, showing Arizona looks and executing what they needed to on both sides of the ball. And I think, I don't think there's any question with the results of the game that this was, I think even more so than the Atlanta game, I think this was their cleanest operation of the season. And I think in particular about the offense. When I just watched the condensed replay, I focused mostly on that offensive line. And I don't think there's any question it was the best overall performance of that line this season. And it wasn't just the fact that they were, doing a better job in pass protection or getting a hat on a hat in the run game and moving their guy. A lot of it was stuff that Ryan Grubb did differently too. And I wonder how much of that is because of the personnel that he had on the field. What was their biggest weapon on Sunday in that run game? It was the counter game, right? They ran a lot more gap than outside zone in this game, and they did most of their damage with Sataoa Laumea at right guard. We're going to talk more about him. And Abe Lucas in his 4th game back now from that knee injury, pulling to the left side. Now, I don't want to get too much into this. I know Bryce Coots, my buddy over at Hawk Zone Rundown, tweeted some things about this today. The PFF doesn't agree. For the second straight week, they give Charles Cross and Laken Tomlinson on the left side good run blocking grades, and apparently hated everything that happened from the center all the way over to the right side. But I thought those guys were great, and that particular part of the game plan was great. And really allowed Zach Charbonnet to get loose. His best game as a pro, 22 carries. What was it, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. Had the 51-yarder that really, really broke the game open and changed it in a lot of ways. I think we saw all the best of Zach Charbonnet. I think back to the New England Patriots game. When he had to start, when Kenny Walker started the season injured. He's injured again. That's becoming an issue. It sounds like some additional testing is being done on that calf to see if he'll be able to be available this week. But in that Patriots game, and I know we talked about it a lot on the show, it just didn't seem like the game plan that day fit Zach Charbonnet's skill set. it was a lot of slow developing, vanilla gun runs where, he was being asked to get up to speed quickly and make immediate decisions in which hole to hit. And, that was at the beginning of the season when this offensive line was an absolute complete shit show and struggled in just about every aspect. Little more under center in this game, although they got away from that, to my eye anyway, in the second half. But even the gun runs, they were just set up better. Just gave him a chance to do what he does best, which is be decisive. He's much more of a one cut and go type runner than Ken Walker. And also to put his shoulder down, break some tackles. It just seemed like we saw it all on display Sunday. The vision, the awareness, the acceleration. The 51-yarder ran away from some guys. There's a great picture from in front of him as he's running with like half the Arizona defense right behind him. He also caught 6 balls. He was outstanding. It's in much the same way that I think there's conversations now to be had, and they've been happening for a while, that Jackson Smith-Njigba has become truly the wide receiver 1 for the Seahawks, and Metcalf is the complementary player. I think there may be, I don't think it's an illegitimate question to ask if Zach Charbonnet may be a better fit, at least right now, for the Seahawks offense. That's a question for another day because there's still 5 games left in the regular season, and we'll see if Walker comes back. But what I did find fascinating is that McDonald said that, and I think Ryan Grubb spoke to this too late in the week, that they didn't know until midweek that Walker wasn't going to be able to go. They didn't adjust the game plan after that to suit Zach Charbonnet in any way. So these were changes that were going to happen regardless. So I think that's a good sign because obviously we saw more, to put it as plainly as possible, we saw more holes in running lanes in this game than we've seen all year. And there were times where we saw more push too, where they were reestablishing the line of scrimmage. In hindsight being 2020, it'd be cool in an alternate universe to see how Ken Walker would have done on Sunday compared to what Zach Charbonnet produced with that game plan. Really, really liked it. And we got to see Ken McIntosh have 4 or 5 carries and a couple dynamic ones, get a couple first downs and show his running style, which I think, again, is a little bit more, complementary to what's happening up front right now for the Seahawks on offense. Cool to see McIntosh get some opportunities in this game. Really, really enjoyed that. Also thought we saw some cool things in the screen game. There was one running back screen to Zach Charbonnet, a little delay out of the backfield where he had some pulling linemen coming out and leading the way. We haven't seen enough of that this year, in my opinion, so I thought that was really interesting. Ryan Grubb's best game of the season. Can we agree to that? Second half, now there's some talk out there that we got away from some things. Cardinals adjusted, Grubb didn't adjust. I'd agree with that. Didn't see as much under center in the second half, but when they got the ball back with, 7.5 minutes left, and they needed to burn clock and get it, whether or not they got a score or not, to put the game away, and they did exactly that. They were able to do that. Geno made some big-time throws. I thought Geno was really... my fear the last couple of weeks was that because of that string where he had some bad interceptions, the Rams game certainly, that maybe he would get a little overly cautious. I don't think that's the case. I think he's gotten more judicious, and we saw him check the ball down quite a bit on Sunday, which I think was really smart. But when he had to make big throws, he did. Here's a stat that was posted today about Geno Smith. Let me find this. And this has to do with just true dropbacks, which is when you're not, takes away screen passes and takes away, so this is from Benjamin Solak, on non-play action, non-screen. So just true dropback. The implication here being that these are plays where from the moment the ball is snapped, the defense knows the Seahawks are throwing the football. Thus, the most challenging situation for a quarterback, right? in those situations, first of all, no player in the NFL this year has more true dropbacks than Geno Smith. He leads the league. That's that high pass rate coming into play. But also the fact that, Grubb doesn't call for a lot of disguised stuff and doesn't run as much play action as we would all like to see, right? Here's Geno Smith in those situations in the league this year. 4th in completion percentage, 1st in on-target rate, 5th in success rate, and 8th in first down and touchdown rate. That's when they're true drop back. That's how good he's been in situations where the defense knows he's throwing the football. Maybe that's to their detriment at times, because I feel like Ryan Grubb has been guilty on occasion of being a little overconfident, or maybe it's not overconfidence, but leaning too heavily into that aspect of our offense because that's what we do the best. At some point that can catch up to you and nip you in the, and get you, because defenses, when you play good defenses and they have an indication of what you're going to do, sometimes it just makes it a little tougher. But I thought that was really, really good. Get back to my 3 keys here. Second one was switch it up. Have a different game plan for a team that we just saw 15 days ago. Thought they did that too. Clearly, Kyler Murray confused at times. Threw those back-to-back picks that turned the entire game around. Cardinals go down in the first drive, get that 7-0 lead, right? Mike McDonald put that on himself, said he didn't call a good series there. Certainly did after that. But there were clearly things that Mike McDonald did in the way he called the rest of that game that confused Kyler Murray. And can we not talk enough about how good Ernest Jones has been? Like, I don't keep an eye on every player around the rest of the league, but is there any other middle linebacker this season who's playing as well? Because he was playing well in Tennessee before the trade. His tape there was good. And that Tennessee defense as a whole was playing well as well. But that first interception off Kyler Murray was teaching tape for how to zone drop as an inside linebacker. And Kyler Murray had no clue that was coming. Threw the ball into a window that was tight, but he thought 10 times out of 10 is going to be there. I think he was going to Harrison there. Wasn't he trying to go to Harrison on the inbreaker? Absolutely unbelievable. And then the play by Kobe Bryant, that wasn't so much that Kyler was confused. I think he underestimated Kobe there, that he can make up that ground. And then, sky in the air. Looked like the other Kobe, the other number 8, rest in peace, Kobe with a K, in getting up off the ground to pick that ball off. Completely transformed that game. And so I thought they did that. On offense, obviously showed them something different in the run game in particular, and then on defense did some things to confuse Kyler Murray. And even though they didn't get to him as often, they sacked him 5 times that first one. I don't know if they had a sack Sunday. They got a lot of pressure. Derek Hall in particular, man, I think he drew 3 holding calls. Some of those were crucial. One of them came on a big completion that had to be called back. I thought he was outstanding. I was curious in how they used Uchenna Nwosu. I thought that was going to be a big factor, him coming back, the Cardinals not having seen him yet. They were very, very conservative in how they used him. I haven't seen the snap counts, but by my naked eye, he didn't play at all in the first series, and then was used pretty sparingly. And I don't know that he had that big of an impact on the game, but the fact that he got through it, and he got through it clean. The Seahawks came out of that game, I think, without any new injuries at all, especially with Green Bay and Minnesota coming up the next couple of weeks. He could just be, the more comfortable he gets, the stronger he gets, the more confidence he has in that leg. He could be like, making a late season trade, adding a guy to your lineup that can really help put you over the top. That was cool to see. And just another, the 5th straight game now of seeing a team that's all on the same page, that's in sync. You can see when you watch it. We were sitting 50-yard line club seats. It was like watching the All-22 live, and you could just see the front end and the back end moving in sync, moving together. Defensive backs quick to make their decisions on where to go in their zone coverage and who to cover and who to take. No miscommunications, no blown coverages. We're just not seeing that on the back end. We're seeing it work so perfectly in sync with the guys up front, and with Ernest Jones holding things down in the middle against the run and the pass. Remarkable. I can't say enough good things. The Seahawks had a lot of things going against them in this game. There are those who believe, and you saw it in some of the picks before the game, that it's tougher to beat a team twice in a row, especially when the second one's on the road, right? And that sometimes the most desperate team wins. The Cardinals were a little bit more the more desperate team here, coming off 2 straight losses after the 4-game win streak. In their ballpark, in a place where, their fans are starting to kind of get excited about what's happening. That's a big, big, big win. And if you have any doubts about this team, each of these weeks should start to quell some of those. And then my third one was travel well, right? And I didn't just mean fan-wise, but for the team. Go on the road again. Mike McDonald's 4-1, now 5-1, coaching teams on the road. And I thought, even though they didn't score a touchdown on their first drive, they almost did. Had to settle for a field goal. But I thought it was one of their best first drives of the game. We won the toss, elected to defer. I thought the defense just came out on fire. Intense, cohesive, violent. They played like the home team, to be honest. And I think they were intent in this game on bullying the Cardinals and showing that they were physically bigger, faster, stronger, better. They're the better football team. They just weren't playing like it 6 weeks ago, but it's pretty clear now. And it's becoming a team that's a little bit more, I don't want to say predictable, but like we know who they are now, right? Or we're pretty darn close to knowing who they are. Imperfect, certainly. But we know what we're going to get each and every week. Ever since things started to click, that Rams game going into the bye, even though they lost that game, each week you build confidence as a fan. And now you're starting to see some of the intangible stuff happen. This team is starting to carry themselves with a swagger. They're starting to play with a certain style. This is a team that believes in themselves and has that mentality. And we've heard this for a long time. We've heard a million coaches say this. Pete Carroll used to talk about it all the time, just go 1-0 this week. But they really do feel like a team that has that mentality that hasn't done anything yet and has bigger aspirations, bigger goals, isn't going to settle for the fact that this is the first year of a new head coach. It's a transition year. It takes time. They want to win. They want to win now. They just looked incapable of doing it early in the season because they couldn't stop anybody on defense and they couldn't run the football against anybody, and they couldn't protect Geno. Were those some of the best pockets we've seen all year? Like he had time to throw. And I thought, we talked about this a little bit on the show last week, that as pass protection improved, we saw it get better the last couple of weeks, would that encourage Geno to hold on to the ball a little bit longer? Looking for the big strike down the field, because he does tend to like to do that sometimes. I thought in this game he had his best pass protection of the year. There were times he just had a perfectly formed pocket where he had all the time in the world to go through all his reads, still made quick decisions and got rid of the ball. That tells me, that's a sign to me of a team that's just getting on the same page, to use that term again, and really starting to move forward. Just quickly, some of my other notes from talk about the fan turnout. I feel like it was about 40-60. I was hoping it'd be closer to 50-50, but still, that's a massive turnout. Seahawks always travel well to Glendale. A lot of them, I think there's a lot of snowbirds probably that bail out of Seattle when the dreary winters come, and they come down here where it's 70 degrees and absolutely perfect. They have the roof open. That's kind of rare. Yesterday, we were some of the few who the sun was shining directly down on. So it definitely felt like an outdoor game to me. Tons of fans there, a bunch of fans on my flight that morning, bunch of people walking around. And I'll say this about the Cardinal fans. While while it was a good turnout, I never saw the stadium full. Lots of empty seats. And then I went in to get a beer at one point into the club area where they have all this. It almost looks like a sports book. Tons of big screen TVs, couches, lounges, bunch of bars. There were 200 people sitting in there. Like all the couches and the chairs were full. 20 feet away from the club seats that they pay for to have the best seats in the house. And they were preferring to watch the game inside on TV. I thought that was odd. And I thought it maybe spoke to a little bit of a lack of passion. Fans left really early. They were pouring out of that place. I don't think they're quite there yet. I think they're ready to embrace this team, but it's not. I didn't feel an intensity there as a visiting fan at all. A couple other notes I wrote down. Kyler Murray is just a guy. I'd been saying it for years. I never was sold on him. When they signed him to the big extension, I thought, I probably even tweeted it at the time back then. It's probably on record as saying, that's good for us. Like they're going to commit. They're going to hitch their wagon to that guy. It wasn't just the whispers about lack of leadership. It wasn't just bad body language and the way he would call receivers out and teammates out on camera, on the field, if he felt like they messed up. I just never felt like he consistently enough was surgical as a passer. He'll make great plays. He'll do phenomenal things. He'll scramble around and make, like a prime Russell Wilson play. Although now in 2 games this year, Seahawks really, really figured out a way to shut that down. We didn't see that as a weapon from him at all. But even downfield, he makes the great throw on the first drive, the 29-yarder to give him a 7-0 lead. And then he comes out on the next 2 drives and throws picks. There's balls that are just sailed over receivers' heads that are open. There was another play I can think of in the end zone where he had a shot. He had to get rid of it quick because he had some pressure. I think Devin Witherspoon was blitzing on one play. He had a guy at the pylon. Didn't even give him a chance to catch the football. Didn't give him a chance. At this point in his career, I thought he'd been playing better, even though it was in a little bit of a different approach. It was more of a point guard, game manager type of approach. I thought, well, that's what they're asking of him right now, but he'll get some chances to take more shots down the field. He's not a guy that scares me. And if I'm a Cardinal fan, I'm a little concerned about the fact that guy is our quarterback long term. Touched on this earlier, but JSN is wide receiver 1. He's the best wide receiver we have, and that has nothing to do with whether or not the Seahawks should give Metcalf an extension. They absolutely should. He's a unique player. He's an important player. They need them both. And then my final note that I hadn't already touched on, because I wanted to talk about Charbonnet maybe being a little bit better fit for this offense right now, and McIntosh needing some touches. I think he's earned that. Can we give John Schneider some credit? He's taken a beating this year. It's been, really, really popular to beat up on him for failing to build an offensive line that from week 1 this week was ready to help this team win. It's easy to sit in the stands and throw stones. It's easy to do that. And it's easy to pick on someone's failures. Look all around the NFL. Tell me who the 5 best GMs in the league are. And give me a half an hour, and I'll come back with 10 dumb things that they did as a GM. Bad draft picks, free agent misses, bad contracts, taking guys in the draft 5 spots ahead of someone else that ends up being an all-pro. They all make mistakes. But at the end of the day, can they put a good team together on the field? And I think part of that is admitting your mistakes and being able to move on from them. Schneider went out and got Jerome Baker and Terrell Dodson to hand to Mike Macdonald. We all know now that Macdonald didn't have a lot of input in that process that early in the offseason because he was too busy just trying to get to know his coaching staff and get them ready for OTAs. They weren't as involved in the draft and free agency process this year as they will be moving forward. those guys didn't work. They couldn't provide Coach McDonald with what he needs out of his inside linebackers to run his defense successfully. So Schneider said, okay, gone. Go get you Ernest Jones. Go ahead and start Tyrese Knight, who, by the way, Schneider drafted in the 4th round. You have to give him credit for those things. Roy Robertson Harris, McDonald went on a long tangent on his coach's show on Cairo 710 this morning about how important he is. He's not a guy that fills up the stat sheet, but he does all that dirty work that they used to have Leonard Williams do. And now it's freed up Williams to do what he does best. They used to have to ask Draymond Jones to move inside and do some things that he's not really good at. It's allowed him now to just go after the passer and do some of the things that he does well. It's made him a better player. Roy Robertson Harris was a really shrewd move for Schneider and deserves a lot of credit. And even on the offensive line, as promising as they have looked the last 2 weeks, and can we say this? We've found our right guard, haven't we? Forget about what PFF says. Trust your eyes. Satawa Lamea is our right guard now and moving forward. I think long term. I talk about checking boxes. We've talked about it all year long. That's a box checked. It's checked. Not sure if Abe Lucas is a box checked yet. Need to see him get through the entire season. And then need to see him have an off season where he recovers and gets even healthier. Needs to get to a point someday where that knee isn't even a thought. It's not an issue. He's still wearing a brace on it. I think he's playing well. I don't think he's quite back to where he was as a rookie, but he's close enough. He's a very, very good player, and he's made that line better since the day he stepped back on the field. We still need to wait and see on that one. Is Olu Oluwatimi at center a box checked long term? Don't know. Could still see them trying to draft a center they like, or even going out and signing a good solid veteran, depending on what they do at left guard. But you look at that offensive line that we all feel so much better about today than we did a few weeks ago. 4 of those 5 players were draft picks by John Schneider. Charles Cross, a top 10 pick at left tackle. He's probably going to get a big extension this offseason. Olu Oluwatimi, drafted in the 5th round last year out of Michigan. Satawa Lamea, a 6th rounder this year, and he's playing like a 2nd rounder. And yeah, maybe they missed on Christian Haynes, but they hit on their 6th rounder. So give credit to the GM for identifying that guy and also just not resting on not shutting it down. Like, we got Haynes, we got our guard in the 3rd round, we don't need any more. And we still haven't seen, what Michael Jarrell can become. And then Abe Lucas was the 3rd rounder the same year that Cross came out. You can't just beat up on a guy without also acknowledging his successes. It's something that drives me a little crazy. I'm as critical as anyone. I just try to put it in a little bit better context than I think some other people do. Let's get into some of your questions, comments. Phobia says Green Bay and Minnesota are going to be litmus tests to see if we're really a contender. All in all, we have to beat the Rams. Yeah, there's 3 things. I'm glad you touched on all those there. These next 2 weeks are massive. Green Bay coming in with, I think they have 9 wins. Minnesota with 10 wins. Minnesota doing what they're doing with Sam Darnold, his best game of his career yesterday. It was 364 yards and 5 touchdown passes. He's completely transformed his career. But Green Bay coming in this week, I wasn't quite sure what to think of them. Like, Jordan Love hadn't really been as good in the first half of this season as he was in the second half of last season. He seems to really be coming around. Josh Jacobs, they got a bunch of young receivers, really deep group there. Defensively, they're good enough. It's going to be a fantastic game. A couple of weeks ago, I was worried, I'd say around the bye week, I was concerned that maybe that game would get flexed out of Sunday, because I thought, if the Seahawks aren't going to be in contention, if they fall apart by then. But man, that might be, I haven't looked at the rest of the schedule. That might be the most interesting game of the week in the NFL, and a huge one. I'll say this, they've got to get one of these next 2. And both these games are within a game of Green Bay, 2 games in Minnesota, I think. Right? These games could be for seeding, tiebreakers, things like that. But they're just, I think it's perfect kind of the way the schedule worked out. Since we saw the improvement, now they get a chance where they feel like they're at their best. They're as healthy as they've been all season. They've figured out what they do well, how to put their players in the best position to succeed. Now, damn it, let's go play the best. Let's go play the 2 of the best teams in the NFC right now and see where we're at. I feel like they have to get one of them. But can you imagine if they get 2? And that's what I meant by on the thumbnail, right? Like, get excited. Like, allow yourself to dream a little bit, because that's what this team has given us the opportunity to do now, is allow us to consider the possibilities. What if they come back home? And think about what that atmosphere is going to be Sunday night. Packers fans always travel well. They're a legacy team. There's people that live in Seattle. I know a bunch of them. There's Packer bars in Seattle. This isn't an issue of like Ticketmaster or ticket brokers or people. This is just the Packers travel well. And so that's going to be a thing. But Sunday Night Football, under the lights, I just checked the forecast for mid-November or mid-December. It's about as good as you can expect. It's going to be 46 degrees as a high that day. It'll be obviously chillier at kickoff. No rain. It's just going to be cold but clear. And I think these fans now, they've seen what this team has done on the road the last couple of weeks. The exciting win, come from behind with the Jets yesterday, and then really taking it to the Cardinals, kind of knocking them out of the picture a little bit. They're still live in the playoff race, but I think you know what I mean. I think that place is going to be nuts. If you can come home and reestablish that and get both these games, we might be talking about the sky's the limit. I think even now, like the Seahawks are a much, much tougher team for opposing coaches to prepare for now than they were a few weeks ago. I can't wait for Sunday. That's going to be unbelievable. Heather Ross says, we embraced our team from the time the Seahawks became a team in the NFL. Absolutely. I do think there's a little bit of a difference. Phoenix is one of those what's the word? Transitory. Like, there's a lot of people that live here that weren't born and raised here, that moved here from somewhere else, either for the climate or to, for whatever reason. It's exploded in growth over the last 20 years. And so those people come from all areas of the country, and maybe they've adopted the Cardinals as their team, but they're not really passionate about it. Also, even if you have been in Phoenix for the last 30 years, you've seen your team leave. You've had to go through that like we did with the Sonics, and then they came back. It's just, I think it's not apples to apples. It's a little bit different. I think it would take a long, pretty sustained period of dominance, like a Pete Carroll era type run, or what the 49ers and Rams have done under McVay and Shanahan, to really get this place to build some intensity in their fan base. But it's certainly something that they're lacking a little bit right now. I didn't feel any kind of a home field advantage for them at all. To McVirus's question here, what was the atmosphere like? Yeah, just from the get-go, it felt like a neutral site. That's what it felt like. It felt like going to a bowl game, and half the stadium was made up of one team's fans and half the other team's fans. Did it feel like the Hawks were in control? That's kind of funny. Obviously, here's how I'll answer that. On the first drive, the Cardinals go down. They get the Kyler Murray touchdown, right? I turn to my buddy and I go, we just need a good drive here. Like, they're going to fix that. I didn't feel like, oh no, here we go again. Uh-oh, they figured us out. Uh-oh, the defense was just a mirage. Didn't feel like that at all. So I don't know that was specific to the atmosphere there necessarily. That's just kind of how I feel about this team right now. Phobia says, got to smoke the Rams at the end of the year. Man, this is looking more and more like it might come down to that game, huh? For the division anyway. One thing the Seahawks have done for themselves with this winning streak is put themselves back into the wild card race. Because for a while there, it was looking like the only path they had to get to the playoffs was to win this division because it was just so tight and this division was down this year. And then kind of about that same time, we thought, well, we don't have to worry about the Rams. That's why this stretch against the 2 games against Cardinals was so key. And then the Rams go out and have their best game of the year yesterday, beat the Bills, albeit in LA, with they hung 44 points on the board. Puka Nacua went off. Kyron Williams went off. The Rams have had a couple of games like that this year. They just haven't followed it up. They just haven't sustained it. But maybe they're just healthy now and feeling good about themselves and kind of figuring out what they do well too. They have a young defense. Maybe that's starting to. Now, the good news is, if you're a Seahawks fan, I guess the silver lining there is, yeah, the offense is doing Rams things, Sean McVay things. But I feel like the Seahawks defense can slow down or compete with any offense out there right now. And that Rams defense is still a sieve. Josh Allen had the highest, by ESPN standard scoring, the highest scoring quarterback fantasy football game yesterday ever in a losing cause. So there's still some vulnerabilities there for the Rams on that side of the ball. But yeah, it might come down to week 18. I was hoping I'd be able to go to that game. I don't think that's going to be able to happen. But again, just makes the next couple of weeks all that more crucial. Don Dickinson, Hawks had a great balanced game. Now we need to split the division leaders and kick the Rams' butt down the road. See, the Rams got our attention yesterday. They obviously got everyone's attention. And I even said it on the show last week when I was talking about the lay of the land in the NFC West that, first things first, got to take care of the Cardinals. Looks like the 49ers are pretty much done with. They're hanging on to a thread of their playoff hopes and played their best game yesterday too. I just think they're so undermanned because of the injuries that's going to be tough for them to overcome. They play the Rams on Thursday. They could do us a huge favor. This is one of those times when, as hard as it might be to even say it out loud or think about it, like, we need to root for the 49ers on this one. I don't know where the game is. If somebody can tell me in the comments. I'm only working on one screen, so I don't want to check here. But yeah, they definitely got our attention yesterday, didn't they? See, McVirus says they're heating up. Got to watch out. Absolutely. Yep. Amber, how you doing, Amber? Great supporter of the show. Got to pull for the 49ers. Let's see. Don says, welcome to the new punt returner, Jalen Darden, by the way. Didn't really get many opportunities. He had the one kickoff return to start the game. Kind of got tripped up. Thought he had a little better crease there. But he handled all the balls cleanly. I think they even had George Halani, I think, was back there to return a kick as well. Darden entices me. He does. He excites me. And I'm higher on him than I was on Williams because Williams just didn't legitimately play a position where I think if Darden's someone that, maybe moving into 2025 is part of this team, it might be cool to maybe get him involved on offense a little bit too. He's a little bit more of a polished receiver than D. Williams was. He was kind of a receiver in name only coming out of Tennessee. Darden's a tiny, quick, darty little dude. He might be kind of fun to play with on offense. Another shout out for LeMaya. My first impression of him against the Jets in his first start was, my goodness, the guy just looks the part. Like, he's big and long and strong and athletic. When he hits guys, they feel it and they move. He moves really well. I think that's why they incorporated so much of the counter stuff and the pulling, because he can do that. And I think that's not Haynes' game. Also, I think it's a tremendous positive sign in how they feel about Abe Lucas's health that they've got him pulling as well. I think that's great. I'll say this about Haynes. First of all, I'll keep saying this. Don't ever give up on a guy because he doesn't establish himself as a rookie. Sometimes, especially those bigger guys, we see it in defensive interior linemen all the time. Even some of the highly drafted ones. It takes them a while to adjust to the strength and the speed of the NFL game. And some of those guys like Quinnen Williams and uh, name any of those guys over the last 5 or 6 years that were drafted in the top 10. It seems to take those guys a while before they really break out. I think that can happen with offensive linemen too. Just off the top of my head, we saw it happen this year in New Orleans. Like most Saints fans and journalists were ready to give up on Trevor Penning as a bust. But then I keep seeing every week, I see from all these gurus that rate offensive line plays, I see him making plays, and he's really taking a step forward. Maybe Christian Haynes moves to the left side and takes a shot and competes with whoever they acquire at left guard next year. Or maybe he does that at center. Don't forget that a lot of the scouting reports thought that he would fit at center, and he actually took a bunch of center reps at the Senior Bowl last year and apparently looked good doing it. Maybe they move him over. Maybe they trade him and get back a 4th or a 5th rounder or whatever. You're never going to get back full trade value for a guy if you deal him his second year. But maybe you cross-train him and have him learn center, and he competes with Olu a little bit. I was there for the Miami game where he ran for like 91 yards. Charbonnet looked good in the Miami game. That was the week after the Patriots game, and it just looked he looked more comfortable, and it looked like they just had a little bit better plan for him. He had that one touchdown run, especially, that was amazing, where he showed off like lateral agility and vision and ran some guys over. What was it, like a 26-yard touchdown? Here we go. Let's get into this a little bit more. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Welcome back. Hearing a lot of good things about Lamea, as you should, but I'm curious about left guard. Now that the rest of the line is starting to come together, do we still need an upgrade in the offseason? Absolutely. Yeah, it's not Tomlinson. He's on a one-year deal for a reason. He's 33 years old. Yeah, his PFF grades have improved, and they're solid, but I still, when I watch on tape, I see a guy that's lunging a lot. He's off balance a lot. He's forward on his toes a lot. I think that's overcompensating on his part to the fact he's just not as stout as he used to be. You have to upgrade. If you only do one thing on the offensive line this year, and look, if we get 5 more games of this type of performance, then I'm fine moving into 2025 thinking it's Cross, Olu, Lamea, Lucas. We need to find a left guard. Like, as much as we've all wanted to beat up on the offensive line and make it sound like the sky is falling, we keep hearing this word continuity. You've got to get a chance. This is now the first time we've had 2 games in a row where we've played the same 5 guys. And that's the result. You have to give offensive lines time. So I'm perfectly fine thinking if this is how this line's going to look going into 2025, let's go get an ass kicker at left guard. And if you want to go spend a bunch of big money and throw it at Trey Smith or try to make a big swing and trade for a veteran that some team's trying to move a salary, or you want to draft Tyler Booker out of Alabama in the first round at 25 or wherever we end up picking, a guy that I think can come in and start immediately, is a natural left guard, played at a big program, big time games every week. That's right about where he's rated. I'm starting to see him get mocked to Seattle a lot. Next, in Alabama's bowl game, watch Alabama. Unless he opts out, which a lot of them do nowadays, and if he's going to enter the draft, he might. But watch some tape. Watch Tyler Booker. He's fun. It's pretty exciting to think about that line we saw yesterday and a rookie first-round draft pick at left guard that can start right away. And then you have young depth. You have Jarrell at right tackle. You have Jalen Sundell, who can play any position. Maybe you cross-train Haynes. He can play both guard spots, but he can play some center too. There's some cool stuff going on there. There's some cool stuff. This is a cool point. George Brodvika, only the coaches know how their players grade out due to assignment, play call, and other proprietary information. This is a great point. And this doesn't just apply to games. This applies to practice too. And one of the biggest takeaways I have from McDonald's first season as a head coach is that he rewards performance, not just in games, but in practice. He gives everyone an opportunity. And if you go out there and you work harder and you do all the right things and you take coaching and you improve and you get better and better every day in practice, in your limited opportunities that are available in practice now in the NFL, He gives you chances. Not just chances to play. He didn't just take Satao Lamea when Anthony Bradford got hurt and rotate him in like they did with Haynes. They said, you're starting against the Jets, you're going to play every snap. Pete Carroll talked about that. Always compete, right? Always compete. He wrote a whole book on it. There were signs everywhere. And early in his career, he did that a little bit. But once the Seahawks got good, like after the Super Bowl, he just had his guys. And you could not beat out certain players, no matter how you did. And we'd see it. We'd see them draft guys at certain positions, and they'd never get an opportunity to play because he would rather go with the vet, even if the vet was struggling on Sundays, because he just trusted them more. Like the unknown scared him a little bit more. He got away from that always compete mantra. So far, through this season anyway, Mike Macdonald has like resoundingly screamed that to the masses. And it's been heard, and it's been executed, it's been put into play. And I think every single situation where he's given a guy an opportunity based on what he saw in practice, it's worked out. Kobe Bryant won that safety job when Jenkins went out, and Jenkins didn't get it back when he came back. Right? Jerome Baker, gone. Ernest Jones in. Tyrese Knight, boom, you're a full-time starter now because we've seen enough. We're going to get rid of the guy ahead of you. And now we've seen it with Satao Lamea at right guard. We saw it with Mike Jarrell earlier. Even though he didn't, he was a little bit more overmatched. It wasn't a resounding success. I think just about every time he's done that this year, it's paid off. Here's McVirus saying this might have been a game where Grubb might have cracked the code to NFL defenses, but we'll see, trying to be more open-minded. So the way I watch football is probably like most of you watch football. And I'm probably like a lot of you that are fans in my profile. And what I mean by that is this. Played it when I was young. Huge fan. Loved it. Obsessive football fan. My parents got season tickets the year the Seahawks were born. We've had them ever since. So I've gone to, tons and tons of games. Watch it obsessively every weekend. Play fantasy football. Covered it professionally for years. Now doing this for years. But I never coached, and I never really learned X's and O's. I know concepts. I know what my eyes see. I know what my head thinks about what is good football and what's not. And so I defer to the guys that do know X's and O's. And so I love having those guys on this show. Griffin Sturgeon, who you all know from the Overload podcast, I'll get him back on the show here again in the next couple of weeks. He was just on with the boys at Hawk Zone a couple of days ago. Check that episode out. But if you follow him on Twitter, you'll know what I'm talking about. He has been really critical of Ryan Grubb. He likes some of his concepts, but in particular, what he's been critical of, and even after this game, and he attributes some of the second half not being as good as the first half to this, but he says Grubb is predictable sometimes. Not in the simplistic sense of predictability to us fans. For example, when Mike Holmgren was here and it was 3rd and long, what did he do? Draw play. That's not the kind of predictability I'm talking about. I'm talking about running different plays out of the same formation, or running the same play out of different formations, right? Griffin is seeing a pattern where, based on formation and motion, you can usually tell if they're going to run or pass. That usually when they go under center, they run the football. And then when they're in gun in certain formations, you can expect to run. That obviously has to be fixed. That has to get better. Because NFL defenses are too good. And they're going to figure it out. In 2 weeks, they're going up against Brian Flores in Minnesota, who's getting head coaching buzz again for the job he's done in Minnesota, even though they moved off of some of their better defensive players in the last year or two, Daniel Hunter and some other guys. But I'll also refer to something that I heard Greg Bell say early last week, also on Hawks Zone Rundown. Big shout out to those guys. They've been doing some great work. Go over and give them a sub. I've been saying it for a long time. Hawks Zone Rundown podcast. Give them a subscription. Get those guys up to 1,000 subs. Greg Bell said they didn't hire Ryan Grubb for this year. They hired him for the long term. They knew there would be an adjustment and a learning curve in jumping to the NFL, and it's getting better. Same with Scott Huff, who he brought with him. Look what that offensive line has done the last 2 weeks. Like, I'm starting to see, okay, Scott Huff, doing some cool stuff. I think Ryan Grubb is really, really smart. I don't think they're going to make a change in the offseason. I would hope and expect that he would get better at those things. And maybe it takes them having to bring in kind of a veteran guy as like an offensive assistant, a quality control guy, or a run game coordinator, something like that. I've mentioned that concept before. But also think about how transformative and tumultuous last offseason was, right? Like going to Alabama and that whole thing, and then being courted by the Seahawks, being torn between where to go there, having to ride out recruiting season, and then come in and learn a whole new coaching staff and make the adjustment to the NFL. He gets to go into this offseason knowing where he's at. And I would imagine he's the type of guy that's going to spend the entire offseason studying, going back and studying, self-scouting, but also looking at some other teams and what they do well, some other concepts and other coaches. I'm not ready to give up on Ryan Grubb yet. All right, what do we got, you guys? Thanks, everybody, for watching. Almost 400 people hopping in here in this this low-tech version of Seahawks Forever. By the way, if you would, hit that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. If you don't already subscribe to the channel, that would be fantastic. If you hit that bell on YouTube, you'll get notified of all future episodes. And then if you want to support the show in any other way, all those ways to do that will be down in the description as well. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing says 400 people and only 2 likes. He's like my agent. Yeah, Scott Huff got a game ball. That was cool. I love seeing those locker room celebrations. I'll say this too. I saw not just the McDonald's speech afterwards. Gave a game ball to Scott Huff and to Charbonnet. But saw some video of those guys celebrating in the locker room. And just to kind of circle back on what I talked about at the very top, this is a team that's starting to feel themselves, man. And you can see it in how confident they talk about what they're doing. And you see it on the field. It's a team that's flying around and playing with some swagger. And those dominant type personalities are starting to come to the forefront, right? We're seeing Devin Witherspoon impact games every single week. We're seeing Julian Love and Kobe Bryant flying around and impacting games, and Ernest Jones. And let's see, where's that comment? I just saw this a second ago. I want to put this up. Shoot. Somebody was saying that Leo dominated again. Didn't get the big sack numbers this time. Didn't get the pick six. But yeah, he's a load. And I think a lot of it has to do with what I touched on earlier, that they're able to play him now in the spot and in the style that suits him best because of the presence of Roy Robertson Harris and, Byron Murphy coming back after missing those 3 games with the injury and being out there every week. He's really, really starting to be dominant on a week-in, week-out basis. Julian Phelan. I live in Texas, but flying out to Seattle this weekend for the game. There we go. For all the people that are going to come watch the Packers this weekend, let's get some people coming to Seattle just to see this game as well. It's a little bit interesting, kind of a non-Seahawks thing. Assuming the Hawks aren't in the Super Bowl, of course, I'm okay with the Chiefs winning. It'd be cool to see the first three-peat, and I'd like to see Mahomes supplant Brady as the GOAT. I'm going to go a different direction. I was just talking to my buddy yesterday about this. My preferred Super Bowl, if the Seahawks aren't going to be there, would be Bills-Lions. I really like that Lions team. How can you not like them? The way they play, they're what you want the Seahawks to be, in a sense. Sounds like if they make the Super Bowl, Aiden Hutchinson might even be able to come back from that broken leg, believe it or not, playing that game. I'd love to see that for him. And, the Bills have been so good ever since Josh Allen arrived. They've been really close a couple of times. They keep losing to the Chiefs. I'm old enough that I'd lived through the Bills and those amazing teams they had back in the 80s, losing 4 straight Super Bowls. That's a tortured franchise, and I would really, really love to see that matchup. Personally, I thought that'd be really cool. Some other stuff in here that I won't put on the screen. You think Mike McDonald will make sure we don't get an off year from Myers because Myers looks good? It's a small thing, but it can be a big thing when your kicker struggles. We've seen it all around the league. I can't remember a year in which so many teams had to switch out kickers this year in season. Not just because a guy gets hurt, but just because he's ineffective. Like there's this whole group, it's almost like there's this group of like 10 guys out there that just kind of sits by their phone every day because they might get a call. Jason Myers has been really, really good. And he's got he's the second highest paid kicker in the league after Justin Tucker. He's got a big cap hit next year. You can always make an argument that if you need to clear some cap space, maybe going younger at kicker is a good thing to do, but you just never know because here's as far as you have to look with this. The San Francisco 49ers last year spent a 3rd-round pick on Jake Moody. We thought it was dumb at the time. We thought it was cocky at the time. Like, who the F do you think you are? You think your roster is so good that you can take a kicker in the 3rd round? But he was that good in college at Michigan. He has not been good in the pros. He's been a struggle, and 49er fans want to move off of him. So love the comment here, showing some love for Jason Myers. And how about Michael Dixon coming out and, coming off back spasms the week before that were so bad he couldn't kick in the second half of the Jets game. And he was questionable all the way up till the end of the week. They had to bring in a practice squad punter this week just in case they had to elevate him on game day. Dixon went out there and punted well, pinned a couple inside the 20, held for all the kicks. Shout out to Michael Dixon for just being a stud. All right. Yeah, so I think that's going to kind of wrap it up. The plan the rest of this week, I'll be back home tomorrow. I'll get, we'll obviously take a preview, take a look at the Packer game by Friday at least. And then I'll be sure to do a show on Saturday morning with some of my last minute thoughts before the game. Did that this last week, and I could tell from the views it got that it was well received, and then a bunch of you commented that you enjoyed it. And I think the reason is that there's a lot of other great Seahawks content creators out there, but typically the thought is that you want to get your preview show for the game out earlier in the week to give people a chance to listen to it or watch it. We're all busy. We all have a lot of things to do in our lives. We all have a bunch of podcasts we like, and sometimes it's hard to squeeze it all in. So maybe there just isn't that much content coming out on Saturday. And so next week, especially with the game being late on Sunday, I'll hop in there as well. Also working on some great guests as always. So let me just check one more time, see if any of you have anything cool to say. I mean, you do, but I think it's time. I think my work here is done. Got to get on a plane early in the morning, fly back to Seattle. Hopefully the week will go by quickly, and then we'll be talking about Sunday night football against the freaking Packers. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Be sure to share this, subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up button and the bell for future notifications. If you want to support the show in any other way, buy me a coffee. All those links are down in the description. As I said, low tech today. I don't have any cool rock music to take you out on. But I'll just say this. This team is worth getting excited about. This team is fun to watch. They're starting to look like the team Mike McDonald described he wanted them to be. And that is the most promising thing that I can say to anyone who's on the fence about whether or not they think this team's good. I've referred to this a bunch on this show in the past, but when Pete Carroll was hired, he stood at that podium the first day when they introduced him. The hair wasn't all completely gray yet, but he was sure Pete Carroll. You can still find that press conference. Go look for it. He lays out his vision of how that team was going to play on offense and defense, what kind of team they were going to be. And then it took 2 years, but he went out and built it exactly in that defined image. Mike McDonald was very, very clear with us from the day he was hired about the type of team he wanted to build. And what got really, really concerning there the first 6-7 weeks is the team we saw on the field looked nothing like what he described he wanted to build, despite the fact that we all thought there were some pretty cool players on this roster. And overall, a pretty good group of talent. Now we're starting to see, week in, week out, this team becoming more and more exactly like he said they wanted him to play. And maybe this was the final piece on Sunday where they were able to run the football in the manner that he desires. If they can continue to do this, it's still 1 week at a time, right? With a new team, they could just stub their toe, they could have a bad week, or they could run up against an opponent that has the right skill set and roster to exploit a certain thing. Maybe they see something on tape that nobody else saw. That could very well happen. But we're watching this team grow up in front of our eyes and gel and come together and play a brand of football that allows you to win games against just about any kind of team you could possibly come up against. You want to try and ram the football down our throats, running the football? Okay, we've shown now for 6 straight weeks that we can stop that. You want to just spread us out and throw it 50 times? Okay, we're going to get after your quarterback, and we got some guys on the back end that can cover anybody. It's a really fun thing to watch. I want to stop trying to compare it to 2012, but it kind of feels like that too. So anyway, thanks for watching, you guys. I'm Dan at Seahawks Forever on Blue Sky and Twitter. I'm always still going to call it Twitter. And I'll remain there because it's good. It's good for the show, and it's still my biggest audience and a way to get the word out. But okay, let's throw one last bonus in. I'd rather be flying an X-wing. Got this one in here. Probably have to talk about this every week because it kind of evolves every week, right? So we'll end on this. Here's a little bonus. I already gave my sign off, but here's a bonus. He says, because he's responding to somebody else here, and I don't see. Here it is. Let me give credit to both of them. Deep Seed 19300 says, what do you think they'll do at QB this offseason? X-Wing answers for himself and says, draft trade for a younger QB to sit behind Geno for a year or two. Here's my thought on that. Currently, I think it's solidified over the last couple of weeks. I want to see the Seahawks devote 3 roster spots to a quarterback next year for the first damn time. Other teams have done it. They need to do it. Unless someone calls and says, hey, we really need a quarterback, we'll give you a 3rd for Sam Howell. I'm bringing back Geno 100%. Read those stats off earlier. He is a good quarterback. And I think if we get more performances from the offensive line like we saw against the Cardinals, granted, grain of salt here, Cardinals came into that game 30th in the league in pressure percentage. Okay? So this wasn't an elite defensive line or pass rush they faced. But still, it didn't matter earlier in the season. We didn't have to face anyone elite, and we still couldn't protect Geno. He's a very, very good quarterback who's wired the right way to win big games. You absolutely bring him back. I'm not even going to talk about contract right now, right? Other than to say this, again, do yourself a favor, go to overthecap.com, go to the salary cap calculator, click on 2025 Seahawks, and with like 3 clicks of the mouse, you can make some moves on that roster that aren't going to affect what you put on the field all that much as far as, a winning team. And you don't even have to touch Geno's deal, even if you just brought him back on that cap number for next year. But to finish my point, Geno, Sam Howell, last year of his deal at $1 million, and draft a guy. absolutely draft a guy. This is the draft for it, I think. Assuming that all the guys that we think are going to come out, this draft is going to have more depth and layered talent spread out throughout the rounds. It's not just going to be like last year. It's not going to be top 10 or bust. There are going to be some guys with some question marks, but some traits and skill sets and some ceiling that you can maybe get a guy in the second round or the third round that you can sit on and dream on a little bit. And I'm not going to get real specific about who I think some of those guys are right now because I haven't really deep dived into scouting tape. We'll do that when draft season gets here. I have my thoughts, some of my early thoughts, but I'll save those. John Schneider keeps telling us that, he grew up in Green Bay under Ron Wolf, learning that you draft one every year because you find a great one every once in a while, or they become assets and you can trade them for draft picks, and they did that a lot there. Absolutely want to see them draft a guy this coming year. And I think it's time for Schneider to just put up or shut up and take a guy. Maybe even in the first round if things fall a certain way, right? I'll give you a name. You guys want names? If Quinn Ewers is there at 25, I'm taking him. I'm a big Quinn Ewers believer. But there's enough question marks about him that I don't think he's a top 15 pick. So that's just one example. But there's guys that I would like in the second or third round if they last until then as well. I think you have to be proactive there. Anytime your starting quarterback's 35 years old, no matter how good he is, right? You have to have a contingency plan. Now, the thing that we don't know, and I can't wait to get to the offseason and really start to dig in with some of these guys that cover the team on a daily basis. And we might not know unless one of the coaching staff comes out and says it, is how this organization feels about Sam Howell today. Because these guys don't get a lot of reps in practice. If you do, they're scout team reps. So how can they even really judge, how he looks in practice? Because all we heard throughout training camp was, especially, he started off really poorly. He wasn't that good, but then we saw him get in the games and he looked really good. I'm a Sam Howell believer, but you can't bank on that. If we had gotten to the end of the season and gone 6-11 and there were all sorts of issues and it looked like it was going to take a couple seasons to put it together, then I might have leaned on the side of see if there's a market for Geno. If there's not, release him, go with Howell, draft a guy. Let's address that position and then fill out the rest of the roster. That's not where we're at. It's not where we're at. This entire defense will come back intact next year. They can rely on that. And we're seeing some of the other parts of the offense come together as well. This is a team that's going to go into 2025 with Super Bowl aspirations, no matter what happens the rest of this season. So, yeah, you're not going to move off your veteran quarterback if that's the case. Oh, see, now we've started the draft talk. I don't want to get into that yet. We'll have these episodes. So if Tyler Booker and Ewers are sitting there at 25, which way are you leaning right now, Dan? In that case, I'm taking Tyler Booker just because because we don't need a quarterback for today. Like, Booker's one guy, but this is not a great draft. And there's a good chance that when we get down to the 20s, we're out of first-round grades. This might be one of those years. We hear that in a normal year, it's usually 16 to 18 first-round grades. The Seahawks are a little bit tighter than some teams even. There might only be 10 this year. When Rob Staten was on the show, he only had 9 first-round grades. So I'm high enough on Booker. He fits an absolute need. He's a shit kicker that can come in on day one and maybe put that offensive line over the top. So in that specific example, I'm taking Booker. I'm just saying Ewers is a guy that some people have going in the second or third round, but I wouldn't bat an eye if we took him in the first. Let's see. Hey, speaking of quarterbacks, there's Bryce. Gave you a shout out earlier in the show, so hopefully those of you who I encouraged to go over and give them a sub did. Bryce is a quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, runs a quarterback academy in addition to co-hosting the Hawk Zone Rundown. So always love his quarterback impressions. Bryce crossover this week. Always open for a Bryce crossover. Andy Pinto says Shedeur Sanders. Well, the Seahawks aren't going to be drafting in the top 5. So that's not going to be a possibility. All right. let's wrap this up. I got to get some sleep before I get on a plane early in the morning. But cheers to all of you. Thanks again for tuning in at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe, support the show, do all that stuff. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks. We'll see you guys.